Yo, what's up, everyone? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Prodigy channel. And I joined my first ever Guillotine League for the 2022 fantasy football season. It's an 18-person league. And for anyone who doesn't know how a Guillotine League works, basically, you do your draft, and there's no head-to-head matchups once the season starts, okay? Basically, the person who scores the least points on a given week, they're cut from the league. So if you score the least points in week one, you're kicked out of the league, you're done for the season, and all of your players go on the waiver wire where the rest of the league can then bid on the players on the waiver wire. So I've never done it before. There's a lot of strategy in terms of how to spend your free agent budget. Do you go after a player early? Do you wait? Do you save it for the end? There's a lot to deal with, but I have also never been in an 18-team league, period. It's hard to say. 18-team league, period. So just quickly doing a draft recap. We did the draft before the season, obviously. The Thursday game, the season opener already happened, but just to give you a little insight into the draft, I really actually liked my first and second round picks. Even with the 18th overall pick, I got Leonard Fournette, which I think for a Guillotine League, especially wanting to go with safe players to start the season just to make sure I don't get eliminated early, getting Lenny in the first round, I thought was the perfect type of pick. And then I went with Aaron Jones next. Okay, so these are the first two rounds. Cam Akers went a pick after me. Glad I didn't take him. I never would have taken him with the 20th overall pick. That's even early for Cam Akers truthers. So that was a bad pick for this team. I did think about going with Mark Andrews, but in an 18-team league, most teams have a bad tight end, right? There's really Andrews, Kelsey, maybe like a Goddard or a Schultz improve and enter that top tier. Maybe if Kittle and Waller have good seasons, they'll be in that tier. But for the most part, there's only at most a handful of real difference-making tight ends in the league. So I figured I'm better off just going safe with the two running back approach, especially because you only need to start one tight end. And I believe it's one quarterback, two running back, two or three receiver, and there's two flexes, something like that. So I went with the running backs, a position that I need plenty of. Then in the third round, you can see kind of how the draft went if you care. But I went with Darnell Mooney and Allen Robinson. I went with Mooney because he should see plenty of volume, right? He's really the only target along with Cole Kmet in the Bears offense. And while the offense as a whole might struggle, I think he'll see enough volume to be a safe play. And then a former Chicago Bear, used to be teammates with Darnell Mooney, I went with Allen Robinson. And he is a wide receiver for the Rams, and he already played this week, and he had one catch for like 12 yards. So I drafted Allen Robinson thinking he'd be a safe pick and get out to a decent start, but he could not have killed my lineup anymore. So in a Guillotine League, you really don't want your league to start off like that. You don't want a player in your lineup scoring like 1.5 points because obviously you want to survive the week. So you just don't want your lineup to bust. And that is just what my lineup did. Next up, so we went through the fifth round. I ended up with Rashad Bateman. I'm trying to think if there's any. I was kind of hoping that Brandon Cooks or Breece Hall got to me going back to round 3. I was hoping that one of them got to me, maybe Chase Edmonds. But a lot of times in this draft, a player got sniped right before I was going to pick him. So Brandon Cooks would have been a tremendous pick for me because I think he's always underrated. He's always consistent. And then Breece Hall, I'm thinking he'll see at least decent volume this year to be consistent. I did end up going with Rashad Bateman in the 5th round. He's going to be the number 1 receiver for Baltimore. Obviously, Mark Andrews is probably the number 1 target, even though he's a tight end. And then I went with Kareem Hunt, who I think is definitely one of the values that I like a lot in drafts. From what I've experienced, both him and Melvin Gordon, I think this late in drafts will offer enough volume to be good for fantasy. And you have to remember, before he got hurt last season, Kareem Hunt was a stud for fantasy. Obviously, if they had Deshaun Watson for most of the season, their offense would be a lot more potent. But they have Jacoby Brissett for, the first 11 of their games. So their offense might not be that great, but I think he'll see enough volume, and he's talented enough to be good for fantasy. And then I still don't have a quarterback, and I almost went with Joe Burrow, but I thought, you know what, there's only one quarterback. There's a lot of skill positions we have to fill, and once I make this pick, I gotta wait a long time. So like if you have the first pick in a 10 or 12 team league, you gotta wait a long time. It's even worse for an 18 team league. So I pass on Joe Burrow, even though I would have loved to have him on the team. I just went with the skill position players, and there was a run of quarterbacks. Went Burrow, Stafford, who actually had a bad week 1 against the Bills, Aaron Rodgers, Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins. Cole Kmet is someone that I was thinking I wanted to fall to me at tight end. Then Trevor Lawrence goes off the board. And then I was hoping to the good fantasy lords that Trey Lance would make it back to me, but he didn't. So I was hoping one of these really good quarterbacks would make it back to me, and no one did. Literally so many quarterbacks went off the board. So I went with Pat Freiermuth. I figured at this point there's so many quarterbacks left that I don't like. There was a tier break after Trey Lance. So if Trey Lance was there, I would have snatched him up immediately, not even a second thought. But after him, there was a tier break. So I'm like, you know what? I'll just fill in the tight end role, get Pat Freiermuth for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then I went with Jacoby Myers, someone who should see some volume but not be spectacular for the Patriots. But again, I'm going for consistency in this league. And then as the season goes along and teams are eliminated, there will be more explosive players on the waiver wire. And then I'll drop a guy like Jacoby Myers. Moving along, the quarterback was really where I struggled in this draft. Tua went off the board. I didn't really want him because he plays the Patriots week 1. And while I think he could have a career year, especially now that they brought in Tyreek Hill, they still have Jalen Waddle, Mike Gesicki. I don't like that matchup week 1 against the Patriots. I think that'll be a low scoring game, so I didn't reach for him at all. And then you can see here going into round 9, I really just don't have a lot of options at QB, but I knew I had to take one. So I took Justin Fields. He had a rocky season last year, but towards the end of the year, he kind of showed some flashes. So he is currently my starting quarterback in this league, which is definitely not ideal, not something that I wanted heading into this draft, but my skill position players are really good as a result. And again, there were multiple times where people just got sniped in front of me, including Trey Lance. So it is what it is. And then I went with Jamison Crowder. I'm not really excited about that pick. I just, I went with him because maybe he'll see volume for the Buffalo Bills offense. Matt Ryan is someone I also thought about picking up. In hindsight, it's hard to say if I should have gone Justin Fields or Matt Ryan. Ryan might be a little bit safer. He plays the Houston Texans, but what if the Colts, it's his first season with the Colts. What if the Colts get up big, which they usually do against the Texans, and he doesn't need to throw the ball? Then Matt Ryan might bust. So I'm kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel for quarterbacks here. I went with Darrell Williams in the 11th round. James Conner is the lead back in Arizona, but if something happens to him and he does tend to get injured a decent amount, then Williams will probably see some work. And I went with Amir Abdullah. It's late in the draft. He's a pass catching running back. Maybe he'll have a role for Las Vegas, but probably not. We'll see. He'll be involved, but enough to be relevant for fantasy. Who knows? And then also, you will see some kickers and defenses that get drafted. We drafted on ESPN, and then the actual league is on My Fantasy League or My Football League, or whatever it stands for. I think My Fantasy League. And so on ESPN, some people, for whatever reason, they didn't limit it so you couldn't draft a defense or a kicker. So some people drafted them even though they're not actually a position that we have in our league. So just in case you're wondering why, that's why. And then the last few rounds I went with Logan Thomas at tight end just because who else am I going to draft? And then I went with Mitch Trubisky as my quarterback too. Definitely not what I wanted. Hopefully he runs a decent amount and he does have some weapons there in Pittsburgh, so maybe he'll surprise for fantasy. But I was kind of surprised at how often quarterbacks went off the board in this league, because there were teams that had a stud quarterback 1 and they're drafting, some sort of other quarterback 2. I don't remember any exact examples. But typically if you have a stud QB1, you don't need to draft a backup quarterback. Although you can't make trades in this league, you can only get people from the waiver wire. So maybe, if for whatever reason you have a stud quarterback and they're ruled out with an injury last minute, you want to have someone because you can't trade. But if it was a normal waiver wire, there should still be a streaming option. So that was interesting. That's one thing I didn't expect. And then these were auto draft. There's only 14 rounds in our draft, and for whatever reason, the ESPN draft was set for 16. So these were just auto picks. It's all irrelevant. And then this is my team. I'm setting my lineup for my first ever Guillotine League. I already played Allen Robinson on Thursday night. Allen Robinson, 2.2 points. He had 1 reception, so this is a full PPR league. I forgot to mention that, and 12 yards. So bad start for Allen Robinson. Other than that, I got Justin Fields in at quarterback. Leonard Fournette, Aaron Jones are auto starts for me, at least until the Jonathan Taylor manager gets kicked out and I pick up Taylor for my team, which probably won't happen because even if he's a free agent, someone will probably bid their whole budget on him. But that's what makes this league fun. Kareem Hunt, I'm going with him. And then after Allen Robinson at wide receiver / flex, I'm going Mooney and Rashad Bateman. And then I got Pat Freiermuth at tight end. So we'll see what happens. I'm just going to make a quick little video about this league every week just to kind of have a fun little series with it. And we'll see what happens. I hope I make it all the way to the end and I win my first ever guillotine league that I've been in. But I feel like I have a lot of learning to do. But we got off to a bad start, but hopefully the rest of my team kind of pulls their weight a little bit because Allen Robinson's start was not ideal. And yeah, stay tuned to see what happens for the duration of the league. I'll keep making videos as long as I'm in the league. And thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. Make sure to drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.